"If you want my protection," the Mafia boss said, "you'll have to marry me before midnight." The steam from the industrial dishwasher felt like another layer of grime on Eva Mancini's skin. It was her second job, washing dishes at a high-end Italian restaurant, and it only marginally paid better than her first job, slinging hash at the Westport Grill. 2 jobs, 16-hour days, and she was still drowning. She was drowning because of Leo, her younger brother. All restless energy and hollow promises. Had a sickness. It started with cards, moved to horses, and now lived in the dark corners of the internet. In sports bets she did not understand. What she did understand was the number, $70,000. Leo owed $70,000 to the Argento crew. Eva wiped her chapped hands on her apron, her mind spinning on that impossible sum. It might as well have been $7 million. She lived in a third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that smelled of damp pavement and desperation. Her share of the rent was $400 a month. Her tips, if she was lucky, covered groceries. Leo, who was supposed to be splitting the bills, had not contributed in 6 months, always chasing the one big score that would fix everything. Instead, he had invited monsters to their door. She finished her shift close to midnight, the ache in her lower back a familiar fire. The walk home was short, but tonight it felt menacing. The streetlights seemed dimmer, the shadows in the alleys deeper. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her sneakers sticking to the grimy linoleum. As she reached her landing, they stepped out from the alcove by the incinerator chute, 2 of them. They wore cheap suits that looked too tight, and their smiles were lazy and cruel. "Eva Mancini," the taller one said. It was not a question. Eva froze, her hand gripping the keys in her pocket. "I don't have it." "We need more time. Please." "Time's up," the shorter one rasped. Stepping closer, he smelled like stale cigarettes and garlic. "Leo's a ghost, but you're right here. And Mr. Argento, he hates being ignored. I get paid Friday." Eva lied, her voice trembling. "I can give you something." The tall one laughed, a dry, ugly sound. "We ain't collections, sweetheart. We're motivated." He reached out and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Maybe Leo doesn't care about money. Maybe he only cares about this. He shoved her against the apartment door, the metal jangling her keys. Eva cried out, a sharp gasp of terror. The shorter one fumbled with the top button of her coat, his knuckles grazing her chin. "Get off me," she yelled, twisting, trying to bring her knee up. The tall one just pressed his weight against her, pinning her. "Argento figures you're the collateral. Let's see if the merchandise is worth 70 grand. He was leaning in, his awful breath on her cheek, when the door to 3B flew open. Mrs. Petrov's German Shepherd, a 90-pound beast named Boris, exploded into the hallway, barking with a deep, guttural rage. The men recoiled instantly. Boris lunged, his teeth snapping at the air just inches from the shorter man's face. "Get that damn dog back," the tall one yelled, holding his hands up. "Boris, heel!" "Mrs." Petrov shouted, her eyes wide with fear as she gripped the dog's collar. The men did not wait. They scrambled down the hallway and disappeared down the stairs, their bravado vanishing in the face of the snarling dog. Eva sagged against her door, shaking so violently she could barely fit the key in the lock. She stumbled inside, bolted the door, and slid to the floor, hyperventilating. They had touched her. They had put their hands on her. The next morning, the bruise on her arm a sickening shade of purple. She went to the police. The precinct was loud, sterile, and smelled of burnt coffee. The desk sergeant looked bored as she recounted the story. He typed Leo's name into the computer. His expression soured. "Leo Mancini," the sergeant said, looking up at her. "Your brother?" "Yes, but this is about me. I was assaulted." "Ma'am, your brother's name is flagged in 6 open investigations. Petty theft, assault, and known association with organized crime elements. This isn't random mugging. This is a civil dispute." "Civil? They put their hands on me. They threatened me. Did they steal anything? Did they use a weapon?" He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Look, you're telling me your brother owes money to loan sharks, and they sent guys to scare you, unless then they actually hurt you. And you've got more than a bruise and a story. There's nothing we can do. You tell your brother to pay his debts, and I'd stay away from him, if I were you." Eva left the precinct feeling colder than she had in the hallway. There was no one. No one was coming to help. She was on autopilot at the diner, her hands shaking as she poured coffee. The Westport Grill was busy, the lunchtime rush a loud chaos of clattering plates and shouting orders. She moved through it all in a fog of terror. A man in the back booth, booth 12, motioned her over. He was alone, which was unusual for such a large booth. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary, tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders. He was dark-haired, with a strong jaw and eyes so intense they seemed to absorb the light in the room. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and he radiated a stillness that was almost unnerving. "Coffee," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Black and toast, dry." "Coming right up," Eva said. She brought him the order and moved on. She did not see him watching her. He watched as a trucker at the counter snapped his fingers at her. He watched as a businessman in booth 4 complained loudly that his soup was cold, demanding a free meal. Eva handled the businessman with a cold, quiet dignity. "Sir, I just brought that soup from the kitchen. It is not cold. I can bring you another, but you will be paying for both." The man turned red, sputtering about getting her fired. "You can try," Eva said, her voice flat, "but you will still pay your bill. Now, do you want the soup, or shall I take it away?" The man, stunned by her refusal to be bullied, just grumbled and ate his soup. From booth 12, Dominic Varelli watched the entire exchange, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. He sat for another 20 minutes, finished his coffee, and stood. Eva moved to clear the table, expecting a standard $5 tip on a $6 check. Instead, folded neatly under the saucer, were 2 crisp $100 bills. Eva stared at it. $200. She looked for the man, but he was already gone, disappearing into a black sedan that was idling at the curb. She pocketed the money, her heart hammering with a different kind of fear. It felt less like a tip and more like a transaction, like he had been buying something. That night, the fear was a living thing. She got off the bus and practically ran to her building, clutching her keys like a weapon. She kept looking over her shoulder, convinced the 2 men from the night before were lurking in every shadow. She was halfway down the block when a dark sedan, a different one from the diner, turned the corner. It slowed as it approached her, pacing her walk. Eva's blood ran cold. She started to run. The back window of the sedan slid down. She saw the dark shape of a man's arm, the glint of blue steel. A scream died in her throat. Before the sedan could fully stop, a massive black SUV, the one from the diner, screamed around the corner, its engine roaring. It did not slow down. It swerved violently, cutting off the sedan, its heavy-duty bumper aimed directly at the driver's side door. The sedan's driver cursed, slamming on the brakes and cranking the wheel to avoid the collision. The opportunity was lost. The man in the black SUV just stared them down. Tires squealed on the pavement as the sedan threw itself into reverse, whipped a U-turn, and sped off into the night. Eva was pressed against the brick wall of a bodega, gasping for air. The SUV did not move for a long moment. It sat there, a silent guardian, its tinted windows revealing nothing. Then, as if satisfied the threat was gone, it pulled away smoothly and disappeared. She did not understand. The man from the diner, the $200 tip, the SUV. He had just saved her life. The call came 2 hours later. It was from Westport General Hospital. It was about Leo. She found him in a curtained-off bay in the emergency room. He was a wreck. His nose was clearly broken. His left eye was swollen shut, and he was clutching his ribs. "Leo! Oh, my God," she whispered, rushing to his side. "What did you do?" "I tried to fix it. Evie," he wheezed, tasting blood. "I got into a game, a big one. I had a guy who said he could stake me. I just needed to double it. I almost had it." "You idiot," Eva hissed, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. "You went back to them? After they came for me? They tried to kill me tonight, Leo, in the street. They said if I played, they'd pause the vig," he cried, the tears rolling down his battered face. I thought I could win. I really thought I could win. And when you lost, they did this." It was a statement flat and dead. "Eva, save it." She turned away. Her mind a blank wall of despair. He had not just failed to fix it, he had made it infinitely worse. He had proven his debt was unpayable, and that he was a liability. The next time they came for her, the dog and the mysterious SUV would not be enough. "Miss Mancini." The voice cut through the sterile chaos of the ER. She turned. The man from the diner stood in the entrance to the bay. He was flanked by 2 bodyguards, men who wore the same expensive suits as him, but theirs were cut to conceal weapons. The presence of the man himself was overwhelming. He commanded the space, his stillness sucking the air out of the room. "You?" Eva whispered, her hand going to her throat. He dismissed his men with a slight tilt of his head. They remained just outside the curtain. He stepped inside, his gaze falling on Leo's broken form with utter disinterest. Then his eyes locked on Eva. "Your brother is a fool," he said. His voice was calm, a low baritone that held no judgment, only fact. "Who are you?" she demanded, though she thought she already knew, the way the sedan had fled from his SUV, the power he carried. "My name is Dominic Varelli." The name hit her. The Varelli family. They ran the docks, the unions, the entire south side of Westport City. He was not just in the Mafia, he was the Mafia, and the Argentos were his rivals. "You were at the diner, you left that tip, and tonight, that was you. You stopped that car." "The Argentos are reckless," he said, ignoring her statement. "They are making a mess, and they are drawing attention. I do not like attention. So what, you're just helping me? Out of the goodness of your heart?" Eva asked, her voice laced with bitter sarcasm. "I am not a good man, Miss Mancini," Dominic said, taking a step closer. She had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. "And I am not helping you. I am managing a problem. The Argentos have decided that killing you is the best way to settle your brother's account. It sends a message. It proves they're serious. But they're too stupid to realize that attacking a civilian on my side of town is an insult." "So this is a turf war, and I'm in the middle?" "You are the middle," he corrected. "As you are. You are a target. They will not stop. The next time, my men might not be there. They will succeed. You will be dead before the sun comes up." Eva's breath hitched. She looked at her pathetic brother, sobbing in the hospital bed, and back at this cold, powerful man. "What do you want?" she whispered. Dominic Varelli looked at his watch, a simple, elegant timepiece. "It is 10:30. I am offering you a solution. If you want my protection, you'll have to marry me before midnight." Eva stared at him. Then she laughed. It was a hysterical, broken sound that echoed in the small space. "You're insane. You can't be serious." "I am always serious," he said, his expression unchanged. "The Argentos, for all their flaws, respect one thing. They respect family. They respect the Varelli name. As Eva Mancini, you are a target. As Eva Varelli, you are untouchable. My wife would be shielded by my entire organization. To harm you would be to declare open war. They are not suicidal. They are just stupid." "No," Eva said, shaking her head. "No, I won't. I can't." "You can," Dominic said, his voice dropping. "And you will. Or you will die. Those are your options. I am offering you the only one that lets you see tomorrow." She was trapped. It was the hallway, the police station, the drive-by, all rolled into one suffocating moment. He was offering her a cage to save her from the wolves. She looked at Leo, the source of all her misery, his face a swollen mask of regret. She felt nothing for him in that moment, only a vast, empty exhaustion. But he was still her brother. Eva straightened her spine. Meeting Dominic's gaze, she found the last ounce of strength she had. "I'll do it." Dominic nodded once, as if he had expected nothing less. "But I have a condition," she said, her voice shaking but firm. For the first time, a flicker of interest crossed his features. "You're in no position to bargain." "This one." "I am," she said. "Leo, my brother. You have to promise me you will never hurt him, no matter how stupid he is, no matter what debts he racks up, no matter what trouble he causes, your men don't touch him. Ever. You give me your word." Dominic studied her for a long, silent moment. He seemed to be looking past her skin, into her bones. "He's the reason you are in this position, and he is the only thing you ask for. Do you promise?" "I keep my promises," he said. "You have my word. He will not be harmed." He glanced at his watch again. "It is 10:50. We have to go." He led her from the hospital, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. It was not a gesture of comfort. It was one of possession. They drove in silence to a part of the city she had never seen, an old district of stone buildings and gaslight lamps. At 11:45 p.m., they entered a small, private chapel. It was lit only by candles. A thin, grim-faced lawyer and an elderly priest stood waiting by the altar. "There is no time for ceremony," the lawyer said, holding out a thick document and a pen. "This is a legal marriage contract. It is binding." Eva's hand was numb. She signed her name, Eva Mancini, for the last time. Dominic signed his beside hers. The lawyer presented a simple, heavy gold band. Dominic took it. He turned to her. He was so tall, and in the flickering candlelight, he looked less like a man and more like a monarch from a darker age. He took her left hand and slid the ring onto her finger. It was heavy and cold as ice. "By the laws of this state," the lawyer intoned, "you are husband and wife." Eva stood there, frozen. Dominic looked down at her, his dark eyes searching her face. Then, as if fulfilling the final clause of their contract, he leaned in. His hand came up to her waist, his grip firm, holding her steady as his mouth descended. The kiss was tense, reluctant, and utterly final. His lips were not soft. They were firm and demanding, a seal of ownership. It lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. He was branding her. He pulled back, his expression as cold and unreadable as ever. "Mrs. Varelli," he said, the name sounding foreign and heavy. "Welcome to the family." The drive from the chapel was silent. Eva sat as far from him as the plush leather seat of the sedan would allow, her hands clenched in the lap of her worn coat. The gold band on her finger felt like a manacle, heavy and foreign. She was Mrs. Varelli. The name tasted like ash in her mouth. They left the aging streets of the old city and drove for 20 minutes, heading toward the hills that overlooked Westport. The car turned onto a private road, winding through a thicket of dark pines before arriving at a set of wrought iron gates. At least 12 feet high, they opened silently, remotely, revealing a long drive that led to a house. It was not a house, it was a fortress, built of dark stone and reinforced glass. The estate was a monolith of modern architecture that managed to look both beautiful and brutally imposing. It was surrounded by a high wall, and Eva could see men posted at intervals along the perimeter. They were not security guards, they were soldiers. The car stopped. Dominic got out and walked around to her side, opening the door. His hand was offered, but it was not a request. She took it, her fingers trembling, and allowed him to lead her up the marble steps. The front doors opened into a foyer so large and cold it reminded her of a bank lobby. The floors were black marble, the ceilings impossibly high. 4 men were waiting in what appeared to be a study or sitting room. They stood immediately when Dominic entered. They were all older, dressed in expensive suits, and they all carried the same aura of quiet danger. "Boss," one of them said, his eyes sharp. He had graying hair and looked like he might have been a college professor. "The situation with the docks is—" He trailed off, his gaze landing on Eva, his surprise visible for only a fraction of a second before he masked it. "Marco, everyone," Dominic said, his voice flat, echoing slightly in the cavernous room. His hand was still on Eva's back. "This is Eva Varelli, my wife." If he had announced he was setting the house on fire, the reaction could not have been more profound. The men stared. There was no congratulations, only a deep, stunned silence. Dominic met the gray-haired man's gaze. "She's to be treated with the same respect you give me. Her safety is paramount, understood?" "Yes, boss," Marco said, his voice tight. His eyes flickered to Eva, assessing her. She saw no welcome there, only calculation. He saw her as a problem, a complication. "A housekeeper will show you to your room," Dominic said to her, his tone shifting, becoming impersonal. He was done with the announcement. Eva was taken up a wide, curving staircase to a suite of rooms in the East Wing. It was larger than her entire apartment. A massive bed, a private bathroom lined in gray stone, and a sitting area with a fireplace. The closet, she found, was already stocked with clothes in her size, dresses, shoes, sweaters, even lingerie. The realization that he had planned this, that he had known she would say yes, made her feel sick. She felt trapped. The windows were thick, reinforced glass that looked out over the dark, manicured lawns. She was a bird in a beautiful, gilded cage. Dominic appeared in the doorway later. He had removed his suit jacket and tie. "You are safe here," he said. It was not reassurance. It was a statement of fact. "Am I a prisoner?" she asked, her voice small. He walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. "You are protected. The Argentos now know you are my wife. The word was sent the moment we signed the contract. They will not touch you. And when is it over? When can I leave?" He turned to her, his gaze intense. The agreement was for protection. It did not have an expiration date. He took a step toward her. "I will give you space. This is your room. My room is in the West Wing, but do not misunderstand me. Eva, you are a Varelli now. You will not be walking away. Not yet. Not until I know the threat is neutralized." He left her alone. She did not sleep. She sat on the bed, still in her cheap clothes, the cold, heavy ring on her finger, a constant reminder of the deal she had made. She must have dozed, because the screaming woke her. It was her own. She was back in the hallway of her apartment building, the stale cigarette smell, the rough hands on her coat, the man's face leaning in. She sat bolt upright, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs, tangled in sheets that smelled of lavender and money. The door to her room opened so silently she almost did not notice it. Dominic stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the dim light of the hall. He was in trousers and a simple black t-shirt, and he was watching her. "They were here," she panted, backing against the headboard, pulling the sheets up to her chin. "They were touching me." He did not move for a long moment. He just watched her, his expression unreadable. Then he entered, closing the door quietly behind him. He did not turn on the light. "You are safe," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I am not. I can still feel it." She was shaking, the tears of terror and rage blurring her vision. He walked to the bed and sat on the edge, a few feet away from her. He did not reach for her. He just sat, a solid, immovable presence in the dark. "Breathe. Eva." "I can't," she whispered, her breath hitching. "I can't." He remained still, giving her space, letting the adrenaline drain from her. Finally, she quieted, her sobs turning into ragged, exhausted breaths. He reached out, his movement slow, deliberate, giving her ample time to pull away. She flinched but held her ground. His hand, large and warm, gently brushed the damp, tangled hair from her cheek. His thumb grazed her skin, a touch so light it was almost imperceptible, yet it sent a jolt through her. It was the first truly gentle touch she had felt in longer than she could remember. "You are Mrs. Varelli," he murmured, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "No one will touch you again without my permission, and no one will ever have my permission." The simple, possessive statement should have terrified her. Instead, the shaking began to subside. He was the monster who kept the other monsters at bay. She was so tired. Her body slumped, the fear finally receding, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. She leaned forward, her energy gone. He shifted, not grabbing her, but moving to meet her. She rested her forehead against his shoulder. He was solid, warm, and smelled faintly of expensive soap and clean cotton. After a moment, his arm came around her. His hand rested on her back, large and secure, not demanding anything, just holding her steady. She cried quietly into his shirt, and he held her until her breathing deepened, until her grip on the sheets relaxed, and she finally, truly, fell asleep. The next day, Eva learned what it meant to be royalty in a prison. She woke alone, the indentation on the mattress the only sign he had been there. A quiet, older housekeeper named Sophia brought her breakfast, addressing her as Mrs. Varelli, with a polite, sympathetic smile. When Eva tried to walk into the gardens, a guard, a tall, quiet woman with sharp eyes who introduced herself as Rosa, followed her. "I just wanted some air," Eva said. "Of course. Ma'am, I'll be right here," Rosa replied, standing 10 feet away. Eva began to understand Dominic's world. She saw him only briefly, in his study. A massive room lined with books. He was not the gangster from the movies. He was a CEO. He spent the day on the phone, not discussing violence, but shipping logistics, zoning variances, and union contracts. He held Westport in his fist, not just with guns, but with finance, politics, and influence. Some of the staff, like Sophia, treated her with a quiet kindness. Others, particularly the men who guarded the house, looked at her with resentment. She was a weakness, an outsider, a complication brought into their fortress. Marco, the consigliere she had met the night before, watched her from a distance, his expression one of polite disdain. That evening, Dominic informed her they were attending a charity gala. "I don't have anything to wear," she said, gesturing to the jeans and t-shirt she had worn from her old life. He simply nodded to the closet he had stocked. "I'm sure you'll find something." She felt a flash of anger. He had bought her, and now he was dressing her. His doll. She chose the simplest, most severe dress she could find, a high-necked gown of deep navy silk. The gala was a sea of Westport's elite. Politicians, judges, and businessmen all greeted Dominic with a forced, fearful respect. Eva stood by his side, her hand resting awkwardly on his arm, feeling like an imposter. A slick-looking man with a politician's smile approached them. "Dominic, good to see you. And your guest." The man, who she recognized as Senator Rawlings, dismissed her with his eyes, turning his full attention to Dominic. Dominic's hand on her arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "This is my wife, Senator," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Eva Varelli." Rawlings paled, his smile faltering. "My goodness, my apologies. Congratulations, Mrs. Varelli. You were saying," Dominic continued, his tone icy, "that the Southside housing project was stalled." "Ah, yes, the zoning board is proving difficult," Rawlings said, regaining his composure. Dominic took a sip of champagne, his eyes never leaving the senator's. "Those families need that housing. It would be a terrible shame if the board's difficulties were to be exposed to the press, or if the funding for their pet projects in the suburbs suddenly dried up." He smiled, a cold, thin expression. "See to it that it passes. By Friday?" The senator nodded, his smile gone. "I'll make some calls." Eva was stunned. The sheer, effortless dominance he wielded was terrifying. Later, a woman dripping in diamonds, the wife of a rival, cornered Eva by the bar. "You certainly came out of nowhere, dear," the woman said, her voice dripping with venom. "Dominic was always so particular. One wonders what, exactly, you had to do to secure this." Eva froze, the insult stinging. Before she could find her voice, Dominic was there. His hand slid to the small of Eva's back, a gesture that was both supportive and possessive. "She did not come out of nowhere." "Isabella," Dominic said, his voice cutting through the woman's smugness. "She was exactly where I wanted her to be." He did not raise his voice, but the threat was clear. He steered Eva away, leaving the woman pale and speechless. He had defended her. He had defended them. It was confusing, and it made her angry. Back at the mansion, the adrenaline from the evening faded, leaving only a cold fury. She walked into her own room, pulling off the diamond earrings he had insisted she wear. "You enjoyed that, didn't you?" she said, tossing them on the dresser. Dominic stood in the doorway, watching her. "Enjoy what?" "All of it. The control, warning a senator, showing me off like I'm a new car. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your reputation. I'm just part of the Varelli brand now. I was doing exactly what I said I would do, keeping you safe. I don't call this safe, she cried, turning on him. I call this a prison. I can't walk outside. I can't talk to anyone. I'm followed to the bathroom. I want my life back. Dominic. He stepped into the room, his stillness replaced by a simmering energy. This is your life now, the one I saved. You think you can just walk out that door? The Argentos are still waiting. They know you're my wife, but they also know you're my weakness. They are praying you are stupid enough to leave. So I'm trapped here forever? Is that it? You are safe here, he roared. The first time she had ever heard him lose control, the sound echoed in the high-ceilinged room. The tension between them, simmering since the chapel, snapped. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He grabbed her by the arms, his grip firm. You wanted my protection. This is what it looks like. This isn't protection, she spat. It's ownership. His eyes blazed. Maybe it is. His mouth crashed down on hers. It was nothing like the cold, contractual kiss at the altar. This was fierce, hungry, and angry. It was a kiss of possession, a brand of dominance. It was all the pent-up control and frustration of the last 24 hours unleashed. Eva was shocked by the force of it, but she did not pull away. Her own anger and confusion rose up to meet him. She gripped his shirt, kissing him back with a desperation that matched his. Her fear and rage and a terrifying spark of attraction all tangled together. He broke the kiss as abruptly as he had started it. He was breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. He looked at her, his eyes dark with a storm of emotions she could not name. Then, as if realizing what he had done, he let her go. Stepping back, he turned and left the room, slamming the heavy door behind him, leaving her trembling and breathless. Hours passed. She could not sleep. The fight, the kiss, shattered her defenses. She was terrified of him, but she was also, inexplicably, drawn to the safety he represented. She needed to understand. She found a silk robe in the closet, one of the many things he had bought for her. It was heavy, deep green and modest, but it clung to her frame. Barefoot? She padded down the silent hall to the west wing. His door was ajar. He was not sleeping. He was standing by the window, still in his trousers and shirt, looking out at the grounds. I'm sorry, she whispered from the doorway. He turned, his eyes raked over her, taking in the silk robe, her bare feet, her vulnerability. His anger was gone, replaced by that intense, heavy stillness. For what? For yelling? I'm scared. I don't know the rules. The rules are simple, he said, his voice low. He walked toward her, stopping just inches away. You are mine. I protect what is mine. The air was thick with the memory of their kiss. He reached out, his fingers tracing the silk lapel of her robe, over her collarbone. This, he murmured, his gaze dropping to her mouth, is part of it. She did not move. She was terrified, but she did not back away. He was the eye of the storm. He leaned down and kissed her. It was slow this time, deep and searching, asking a question. When she did not pull away, his hands went to the tie of her robe. He slipped it open. He was gentle, his knuckles brushing her skin as the silk parted. He pushed the robe off one shoulder, his lips tracing a warm path down her neck. She shivered. He eased the robe off her other shoulder, letting it pool at her feet. She stood before him in a simple, sleeveless nightgown. He looked at her, his expression raw, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. He was about to lift her, to carry her to the bed, when a single tear escaped her eye and rolled down her cheek. She was not crying from sadness. It was the sheer, overwhelming weight of it all. He stopped instantly. He saw the tear, and his entire posture changed. The heat in his eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, pained control. He sighed. A quiet, frustrated sound. He reached out, but not to touch her. He lifted her left hand, the one with his ring. He turned it over and pressed his lips to the center of her palm, a gesture of almost painful reverence. He closed his eyes for a second. We'll wait, he whispered against her skin. He picked up the robe from the floor and draped it back over her shoulders, pulling the lapels closed, his fingers brushing her collarbone one last time. She was back in her room, her heart a confused, aching mess. He had stopped. He had seen her fear and he had stopped. She stood by the window, looking out at the dark, moonlit grounds, his kiss still warm on her hand. A sharp, cracking sound split the night. Before her brain could even register the noise, the massive, reinforced window beside her exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the room, glittering like deadly diamonds in the lamplight. Eva screamed. Her door burst open. Dominic! He did not shout. He did not hesitate. He launched himself across the room, moving faster than she could have believed possible. He grabbed her around the waist, a guttural roar ripping from his chest, and tackled her. He shielded her with his own body, covering her head with his arm as they crashed onto the thick carpet, shards of glass raining down on them. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice a lethal snarl. Alarms blared across the estate, shouts echoed from the hallway. Dominic stayed pressed on top of her, his weight a solid living shield, his heart hammering against her back, a sniper. Someone had tried to kill her, and her husband, the man she had called a jailer, had just used his own body to stop the bullet. The chaos was instantaneous. Alarms blared, their synthetic shrieks slicing through the night. Eva felt the crushing weight of Dominic on top of her, his body a solid shield of muscle and heat, his arm locked over the back of her head as shards of glass continued to tinkle onto the carpet. "Dominic," she gasped, her voice muffled against his shirt. He did not move. He was listening, his head slightly raised, his entire body coiled. She heard shouting in the hall, heavy footsteps. "Boss, status!" It was Rosa's voice, sharp and professional. "Clear! She's clear!" Dominic yelled back. He rolled off her, moving in a single, fluid motion. He grabbed her, pulling her to her feet and shoving her toward the interior wall, away from the gaping, jagged hole where the window had been. "Don't move," he commanded. He was unarmed, wearing only trousers and a t-shirt, yet he seemed more dangerous than any man with a gun. Rosa and two other guards burst in, weapons raised, sweeping the room. "Rooftops," Dominic snapped. "Two-man team. I want the perimeter locked down. Find the vantage point. I want the casing." "Already on it," Rosa said, her gaze flickering to Eva, checking for injuries. "Are you hit, Mrs. Varelli?" Eva shook her head, numb. "No, he covered me." Dominic ignored them, stalking to the shattered window. He stared out into the darkness, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was radiating a cold, lethal fury. Marco, the consigliere, rushed in, his face pale, a silk robe thrown hastily over his pajamas. "In the name of God, Dominic, the Argentos! They dare to shoot at the house?" Dominic turned slowly, his eyes black and flat. "That wasn't the Argentos." "What are you talking about?" Marco said, bewildered. "Who else would be so reckless?" "The Argentos are gutter trash," Dominic said, his voice a low growl. "They would have used a drive-by, a spray of bullets hoping to hit something. This was one shot, high caliber, from a distance. This was a professional." He looked at Marco, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. They knew the layout. They knew which room was hers. They knew the guard rotations. This was not an attack from the outside. "Marco, this was an invitation from the inside." A heavy silence fell, thick with suspicion. Marco looked genuinely shocked, then offended. "Dominic, you cannot be serious. Our men. I am moving her to my room." Dominic cut in, ending the discussion. He grabbed Eva's arm. "Secure this wing. I want a full diagnostic on the security system. I want to know who was logged in, who was on duty, and who took a breath in the last hour. Everyone." He pulled Eva from the room, half dragging her through the corridors, his grip like steel. He did not slow until they were inside his own suite in the West Wing, a massive, Spartan room of dark woods and gray. He closed the heavy door, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing loudly. Eva was shaking, the adrenaline giving way to a bone-chilling fear. He had saved her. He had thrown his body in front of a bullet for her. "You knew," she whispered, sinking onto an armchair. "You knew this was a possibility. I knew protection was not a theory," he said, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass from a decanter. He drank it in one motion. He did not offer her any. "I suspected they might test the boundaries. I did not expect a sniper." He turned to her, his rage settling into a frightening, sharp focus. "You will not leave this room without me or Rosa. Do you understand?" "I understand," she said. "But Dominic is my brother." He frowned. "What about him?" "He's alone. He's at that safe house. If they can get to me here, they can get to him. He's a civilian. He's not protected like this." "He's irrelevant," Dominic said coldly. "Not to me," Ava shot back, standing. "You gave me your word." "Dominic, you said you would not let him be harmed. This changes everything. I need to see him. I need to know he's safe. It's too dangerous. You are the target. Moving you is a risk. I don't care," she insisted, her fear replaced by a sudden, fierce resolve. "They tried to kill me tonight. I'm not going to hide in this room and wonder if my brother is dead in a ditch. I will see him." He studied her, surprised by the iron in her voice. She was not the terrified girl from the diner anymore. He saw the fire in her eyes, the refusal to be locked away. He had seen that same fire when she stood up to the rude customer. It was the part of her he had recognized. He gave a sharp, decisive nod. "Tomorrow, Rosa will take you. 2 cars, decoy routes. You get 10 minutes with him. Then you come straight back. And Eva," he added, his voice dropping, "you will wear a vest." The next day, she was driven in the back of a black armored car, Rosa in the passenger seat, another car trailing them. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a clean, boring suburb. Leo opened the door, his face a mess of yellow and purple bruises, but his eyes were clear. He looked rested and restless. "Evie!" "My God, what are you doing here?" he said, pulling her inside. The apartment was comfortable, with a full fridge and a large television. "They tried to kill me." "Leo," Eva said, the words blunt. Leo's face went white. "What? The Argentos?" "A sniper, last night, shot out my window. If Dominic hadn't..." She could not finish the sentence. Leo grabbed her. "See? I told you. This guy is poison. Evie, he's got you locked in a mansion and his enemies are trying to kill you. You have to leave him. We can still run. We can go to Nevada. Or Arizona. We can change our names." Eva stared at her brother. She looked at the comfortable apartment, the expensive food in the refrigerator, the complete and utter lack of understanding on his face. He was safe. He was fed. And he was still only thinking of himself. "Run?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Run where?" "Leo, on what money? With what new names? You think they can't find us? They found me inside a fortress surrounded by armed guards. So you're just gonna stay? Be this mafia wife? This target?" "You still don't get it," she said, pulling away from him, the last scrap of her patience gone. "There is nowhere to run. You did this. Your $70,000 debt brought this to our door. This isn't a game you lost, Leo. It's a life you sold, and he was the only one buying." "He's using you," Leo pleaded. "He's protecting me," she countered, her voice rising. "He threw himself in front of a bullet for me. Where were you? You were here, safe, watching cable television, eating food he paid for. He kept his promise to me." "He's kept you safe. I came here to make sure of that, but I'm done. Leo, I'm done saving you. You want to run? Go ahead. But I'm staying with the only man who has kept me alive." She left him standing in the doorway, his mouth open, stunned. She got back in the car, her heart hard and heavy. The part of her that had been dedicated to saving Leo Mancini was gone. She was on her own. When she returned, the estate was locked in a tense quiet. Dominic was in his study, the massive room that had intimidated her just days ago. He was in a meeting with Marco and 3 other capos. She could hear the low murmur of angry voices. She waited outside, and when the men filed out, their faces were grim. Marco paused when he saw her. "Mrs. Varelli," he said, his voice strained with a false politeness. "Marco," she replied, nodding. "The boss is under a lot of pressure," he said, stepping closer. "He's not thinking clearly. He's chasing shadows. Trusting his men is what makes the Varelli family strong. This suspicion is poison. He needs his wife to calm him, not to feed his paranoia." It was a warning, dressed as advice. He was telling her to stay out of it. Eva ignored him and walked into the study. Dominic was standing by the fireplace, staring into the unlit hearth. "Your brother is safe," he said, not turning. Yes. Thank you. He's a fool, but he's safe. She paused. Your men are upset. They'll get over it, he said, turning, or they'll be replaced. Dominic, Marco thinks you're wrong. He thinks it's the Argentos. Marco thinks with his heart, Dominic said, his voice flat. He's a good consigliere, but he still believes in the world his father built, a world of honor. That world is dead. He looked tired, the weight of his empire pressing down on him. Later that afternoon, she found herself alone in the study. He had been called to a meeting downtown. She was restless, the conversation with Marco bothering her. She walked along the bookshelves, her fingers tracing the leather-bound spines. It was not a room for reading, it was a room for projecting power. Her eyes landed on a framed photograph on a side table. It was a younger Dominic, smiling, his arms slung around a man who looked just like him, only happier, his eyes brighter. She opened the drawer beneath the photo. It was not locked. Inside was not a journal, but a single worn file. The name on the tab was Vittorio Varelli. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was an old, thin police report from 5 years ago. A boating accident, an engine explosion. One victim, Vittorio Varelli, Dominic's older brother. The case was ruled an accident, closed due to lack of evidence of foul play. But at the bottom of the report, stapled to the back, was a handwritten note on Dominic's personal stationery. It was just 3 words, scribbled in an angry, slashing script, lies. It was ours. It was our own. He was not just paranoid about the sniper. He was experienced. He knew what betrayal from within looked like. It had already cost him his brother. She could not sleep. The sniper, Leo's selfishness, the revelation about Vittorio. It was all a cold, hard knot in her stomach. She knew Dominic was not in his room. She could feel his restlessness from across the house. She found him in the greenhouse. It was a massive glass structure at the back of the estate, humid and warm, filled with the scent of damp earth and night-blooming jasmine. He was standing in the dark, bathed in moonlight, his back to her. He was pruning an orchid, his large, dangerous hands surprisingly gentle. He knew she was there. You should be sleeping, he said, not turning. So should you. She walked toward him, holding the file. I was in your study. I found this. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have looked. He stopped his work, his shoulders tensing. He turned, his face a mask of cold fury. I told you, you do not touch my things. You do not pry into my world. They tried to kill me. Dominic, she said, her voice shaking but firm, holding her ground. Your world is my world now. You made it that way. Who was Vittorio? His anger vanished, replaced by a deep, hollow grief that shocked her. He looked away from her, back at the pale, white flowers. My brother, he said, his voice rough. He was my older brother. He was the good one. He was supposed to be the boss. He laughed. He trusted people. My father told him it would get him killed. The report said it was an accident. The report was a lie, Dominic said, his voice vibrating with a hatred so deep it was chilling. My father arranged it. He paid the police to close the case. He called it keeping the peace. He didn't want a war within the family. It was someone in your own organization, she whispered, stating the note aloud. He nodded, still not looking at her. Someone wanted him gone. Someone who knew his schedule, who could get to his boat, who could plant a bomb and walk away clean. Someone my father trusted, someone like Marco's father. The air left her lungs. But Marco knows nothing. He believes his father was a saint, and I have been hunting the man who gave the order ever since. Now you know. Now you know why I trust no one. He looked broken, in a way she had never seen. The cold, calculating boss was gone. This was the man who had lost the only person he loved. She stepped toward him. She did not know what to say, so she did not say anything. She just reached out and touched his chest, right over his heart. Her fingers splayed against the warm cotton of his shirt. He looked down at her hand, then up at her face. He was so close. You're not him, she whispered. You don't trust anyone, but you saved me. You put your body in front of mine. You are my wife, he said, his voice thick. I'm more than that, she said, her voice raw. "And you know it." She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was not a kiss of anger or demand. It was a kiss of solace. It was soft and slow, and it was meant to heal. He froze for a second, shocked by her boldness, by her tenderness. Then, with a low groan that sounded like a man surfacing from underwater, he kissed her back. His hands came up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks, his mouth moving over hers with a desperate, pent-up hunger. But this was not the anger from before. This was needed. This was a desperate, starved loneliness. He broke the kiss to look at her, his eyes dark and searching in the moonlight. "Eva, don't," she whispered, her fingers moving from his chest to his hair. "Don't stop. Not this time." That was all he needed. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, kissing him, meeting his hunger with her own. He carried her from the greenhouse, through the silent house, and into his room. He did not turn on the lights. He laid her on the bed, on the cool, dark sheets, and for a moment he just looked at her. He was worshipping her with his eyes. He undressed her slowly, reverently. His lips followed the path of his hands. He kissed the hollow of her throat, the pulse that beat there. He kissed her collarbone, his mouth warm against her skin. He kissed the slope of her shoulder and the delicate skin of her inner arm. He kissed every inch of her like she was both fragile and fire, a priceless thing he had been given and did not deserve. "You are so beautiful," he murmured against her stomach, his breath hot. She shivered, her hands gripping his shoulders. "Dominic." He moved over her, his body covering hers, his weight a comfort, a shield. He held himself up, looking into her eyes. "You are mine, Eva," he whispered. It was not a command. It was a plea. "I am," she whispered back. And he made love to her. It was slow and deep and desperate. It was the colliding of two lonely, broken people. It was a claim, not of property, but of souls. It was a desperate, breathless search for an anchor in a violent world, and in the dark, with his arms around her and his heart beating against hers, Eva, for the first time in her life, felt completely and utterly safe. The fragile peace of the night was broken by the morning. They were lying tangled in the sheets when his phone, the one he kept for secure calls, buzzed on the nightstand. He untangled himself from her, his touch lingering, and answered it. "What?" His face hardened as he listened. "When? How many?" He was silent then. "Double the security. On me, on the house, and on her. I want loyalty oaths. Today, everyone from the capos down to the drivers. I want them to look me in the eye and swear. We are locking down." He hung up. Eva sat up, pulling the sheet to her chest. "What is it?" "Intel," he said, his voice all business again. "The lever gone. The Argentos. They're planning something big, a major move. It's happening soon." He was already dressing, pulling on a clean shirt, his body all sharp lines and controlled power. He called a meeting. Eva, wrapped in his robe, watched from the doorway of the bedroom as he spoke to his lieutenants in the study. "Today, you will all renew your oath," he said, us, his voice booming. "You will swear fealty to me, to this family. Anyone who hesitates will be considered a traitor. There is a cancer in this organization, and I will cut it out." The men looked grim, but they nodded. Marco looked pale. After the meeting, Eva was in the hallway when Marco passed, his phone to his ear. He was speaking in a low, furious whisper, thinking he was alone. "The oath is a formality," Marco hissed into the phone. "He's rattled, but he suspects nothing. He thinks it's the Argentos. Tell Luca to be ready. The shipment arrives Tuesday. He'll be exposed. We'll have everything." Eva's blood ran cold. Luca, the name. "He suspects nothing. He'll be exposed." She waited until he was gone. She ran to Dominic. He was alone in the study, loading a magazine into a handgun. "It's Marco," she said, her voice breathless. He did not look up. "What about him?" "I heard him. He was on the phone. He said you suspect nothing. He's working with someone. He mentioned a name. Luca. He said to tell Luca to be ready." Dominic stopped. He chambered around, the sound a definitive, lethal click. He looked up at her, his face a mask of stone. "No." "What? Dominic, I heard him. He's a traitor." "No," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Not Marco. He's been with my family for 30 years. His father was my father's right hand. He's my brother in all but blood." "But I heard him," she insisted, stepping toward him. "He said you'd be exposed. He's the one who leaked my room. I know it." Dominic slammed the gun down on the desk. "You're wrong!" he roared, his voice cracking like a whip. "You are new to this. You are scared. You misheard me. I know what I heard. Stay out of this, Ava," he said, his voice dropping to a lethal hiss, the warmth from their night together completely gone. "This is my world. This is my family. You do not understand it, and you will not accuse my most loyal man of treason. Do you understand me?" She stared at him, her heart breaking. He had held her. He had whispered his secrets to her. And in the light of day, he still chose the lies of his past over the truth she was handing him. "I understand," she said, her voice cold. "I understand perfectly." She turned and walked away. The rift between them a raw, open wound. He had taken her body, but he still refused to trust her. The silence in the estate was a living thing, cold and heavy, pressing in on Eva from all sides. In the days since their argument, Dominic was a ghost. He was there, a dark, powerful presence at the head of the dinner table, a fleeting shadow in the hallway. But he was not with her. The man who had held her, who had whispered his secrets in the moonlit greenhouse, was gone. Replaced once more by the cold, calculating boss, the night they had shared felt like a dream, a brief, impossible thaw in an endless winter. He did not believe her, and the weight of his distrust was heavier than any sniper's threat. Eva knew she could not let it go. It was not just about being right, it was about his safety. Marco had cancer, and Dominic was blind to it. If her husband would not protect himself, she needed an ally, or at least information. She found Rosa in the estate's gym, a minimalist room of steel and glass. The quiet enforcer was methodically dismantling a handgun, cleaning the components with a focused, almost meditative calm. "Rosa," Eva said, her voice quiet. Rosa did not look up, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Varelli, I need to ask you something. Off the record." Rosa paused, her hands stilling. She finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and gave nothing away. "I only have one record, ma'am, and it belongs to the boss." "This is about the boss," Ava pressed, stepping closer. "He's in danger. I know he is, but he won't listen to me." Rosa went back to cleaning. "The boss listens to what he wants to hear." "It's Marco," Eva said, the words a blunt instrument. Rosa's hands stopped again. This time, she did not look up. A full 10 seconds passed. "Marco is the consigliere. He's been with the family since before I was born." "He's family." "I heard him talking to someone named Luca. He's planning something, a shipment. He said Dominic would be exposed." Rosa carefully placed a spring on the white cloth. "Luca Argento is the one who took over after the old man died. He's reckless." "He's ambitious." "So you believe me?" Ava asked, her heart leaping. "I believe what I can prove," Rosa said, still not looking at her. "Marco. He's been making a lot of noise lately. He's not as careful as his father was. He's been meeting with old contacts. The boss told him to cut loose. He's been making risky plays." It was not a confirmation, but it was not a denial. Risky plays? It was enough. "Thank you, Rosa," Eva whispered. Rosa just nodded, reassembling the weapon with a final, definitive click. Eva's quiet investigation was cut short by a fresh disaster. It came not from a rival, but from the one person she had tried to protect. Leo was bored. The safe house, once a haven, had become a prison. He had spent days pacing the floor, watching television, his bruises healing, his guilt fading, replaced by his familiar, restless arrogance. He had convinced himself that Eva was the one in trouble, that Dominic had brainwashed her. He thought Leo, was the only one smart enough to fix it. He slipped his 2 guards with embarrassing ease. They were stationed outside his door, expecting an attack, not a flight risk. Leo simply went out the fire escape, caught a cab, and went to the one place he thought he could get help, a small-time bookie joint on the east side. He figured he could offer the Argentos a deal, man to man. He would give them inside information on Dominic, which he did not have, in exchange for his debt being cleared, the bookie. Seeing the ghost of Leo Mancini walk into his shop, almost had a heart attack. He listened for 30 seconds, then went to the back room and made a call. 20 minutes later, 2 of Argento's men walked in. They did not listen to Leo's deal. They just broke his nose again, hooded him, and threw him in the back of a van. The call came to Dominic's private line. Eva was in the study with him, the 2 of them existing in a state of armed truce. Dominic answered. "Varelli," he barked. Eva watched his face. His expression did not change, but his entire body became rigid. The knuckles of his hand gripping the phone turned white. "Say that again," he said, his voice a low, lethal hiss. He listened, the color drained from his face, replaced by a dark, simmering rage. "He's dead. You know that, right? You've just signed your own death warrants." He listened again, then slammed the phone down, the receiver cracking. "What is it?" Eva asked, her blood running cold. "Your brother." Dominic spat, the words full of venom. "He left the safe house." "Oh, God, no. The Argentos have him," Dominic continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. "That was Luca Argento. He wants the port, all of it. He wants me to pull my men, give him control of all shipping contracts, or he's going to mail your brother back to you, one piece at a time." Eva sank into a chair, her hands covering her mouth. "He's an idiot. He's just an idiot, Dominic. He doesn't know." "His stupidity doesn't matter now," Dominic said, walking to the window. He was torn. Eva could see it. This was an act of war. The old Dominic, the one before her, would have sacrificed Leo without a second thought. To negotiate was to show weakness. "You have 12 hours, he said, staring out at the grounds. "You have to save him," Eva whispered. Standing up, Dominic turned, his face a mask of stone. "I have to do nothing. He broke my protection. He's a liability. He's a dead man. This is the world you're in, Eva. You wanted me to protect him. I did. He ran." "No," Eva said, walking toward him, her fear replaced by a desperate, cold anger. "No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to let him die because he's stupid. He is stupid. I know that. But he's my brother. And you gave me your word. The word is void." He broke the terms. "This isn't a contract, Dominic," she cried, slamming her hands against his chest. He did not flinch. "This is a promise. You stood in that hospital, and you promised me you would not let him be harmed. This is not about your territory. This is not about your pride. It's about your word. It's about my brother. Please." She looked up at him, her eyes burning with tears. "I am begging you. Don't let him die. Don't make me live with that. Please, Dominic, you told me you keep your promises." He stared down at her for a long, agonizing moment. His jaw was clenched so hard a muscle jumped. He was at war with himself, with his code, with the man he was trying to be. Her plea broke through. The ice in his eyes cracked. He closed his eyes, his breath hissing out. "I'll get him," he said, his voice rough. He was all motion. He hit an intercom. "Rosa, full tactical, my office, now, no Marco." He opened a gun safe hidden behind a painting, pulling out body armor and weapons. "Eva, go to your room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "No," she said. He stopped, a handgun in his hand. "This is not a negotiation. I'm not negotiating. I'm helping," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "This isn't just the Argentos. You're walking into a trap. I can handle the Argentos. But can you handle Marco?" she shot back. "Leo gets kidnapped. Luca Argento calls you to request the port, the one place where Marco's shipment is supposed to arrive, the one place he's trying to expose you. This isn't a kidnapping. Dominic, it's a distraction. They want you to go to that warehouse. They want you and your best men tied up, so Marco and Luca can take the port while you're busy." Dominic froze. He stared at her, the pieces clicking into place, the kidnapping, the timing, the specific demand. It was too convenient. It was too neat. "Rosa," he said into the intercom, his voice a deadly purr. "Split the team. I want a ghost unit at the port. Full blackout. I want them to see everything but not be seen. The rest of you, with me. We're going to war." He looked at Eva. He did not apologize. He did not thank her. He just gave her a sharp nod. It was a sign of respect, a sign of trust. Then he was gone. The hours that followed were the longest of Ava's life. She paced the study, Dominic's study, the one she now thought of as theirs. The house was silent, locked down, the remaining guards posted at every door, but all she could hear was the ticking of the grandfather clock, each second an eternity. She was terrified. Not for Leo. She prayed he would be safe, but her fear for him was a dull, familiar ache. The fear for Dominic was a raw, new, gaping wound. She flashed back to every moment she had spent with him, the cold, hard man at the diner, the gentle hand brushing the hair from her face after her nightmare, the fierce, angry kiss after the gala, the way he had shielded her from the sniper's bullet, his body a living wall. She remembered the broken man in the greenhouse, his pain over his brother, a raw, open wound, and she remembered the night in his bed, the feel of his skin on hers, the desperate, claiming tenderness in his touch. She was not just his wife by contract. She was not just under his protection. She loved him. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She loved this cold, dangerous, broken man. She loved his strength. She loved his hidden softness. And she loved the safety she felt only in his arms. And he had just walked into a firefight, possibly betrayed by his most trusted man. She sank onto the leather sofa, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Come back," she whispered to the empty room. "Please, just come back to me." The sound of tires on the gravel driveway made her jump to her feet. It was hours later, the first hint of dawn painting the sky a sickly gray. She ran to the foyer, her heart in her throat. The massive front doors opened. Rosa entered first, his face grim, but he was moving. He was alive. 2 other men followed. And then Dominic. He was covered in dirt, a long tear in his jacket, a smear of blood on his jaw that was not his, but he was walking. He was breathing. He was alive. He was carrying Leo in his arms, the way he had carried her. Leo was unconscious, his face a swollen, bloody mess, his arm wrapped in a makeshift tourniquet, but he was breathing. Dominic walked past his men, his eyes finding Eva in the dim light. He did not stop until he was in front of her. He gently, almost carelessly, deposited Leo onto a velvet settee. He stood up, his gaze locked on hers. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline still coursing through him. He looked at her, his eyes dark and intense, and saw the tear tracks on her face, the raw terror in her eyes. "I keep my promises," he said, his voice a low rasp. She did not care about Leo. She did not care about the promise. She saw only him. She lunged forward, her hands fisting in the front of his tactical vest, her body pressed against his. "You're alive," she sobbed, burying her face in his chest. "You're alive!" His arms, strong and sure, wrapped around her, crushing her to him. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in. "I'm here," he murmured. "I'm here." He lifted her, one arm under her legs, the other supporting her back. He carried her from the foyer, leaving his men to deal with the medical care for Leo. He did not stop until he was in his bedroom. He kicked the door shut, locking them inside. He set her down in front of the fireplace, his hands on her waist, his body still thrumming with the violence of the night. The fire was a low, glowing bed of embers. She did not wait. She reached up, her hands tracing the cut on his jaw, her thumbs wiping the grime from his cheeks. "I thought you were dead," she whispered, her voice thick. "It takes more than the Argentos," he said, his own hands coming up to frame her face, his touch rough, possessive. She kissed him. It was a desperate, claiming kiss, full of terror and relief, and a love so fierce it stole her breath. She kissed his jaw, his neck, the strong column of his throat, tasting the salt, the smoke, the man himself. "I was so scared," she whispered against his skin. He pulled back, his dark eyes burning into hers. "Never be scared of me. I want all of you. Dominic," she whispered, her voice raw with an emotion she could no longer hide. Not just the protection, not just the name, All of you." A storm of emotion passed over his face. He had faced bullets tonight, but this, her raw vulnerability, his own, seemed to shake him more. With a low groan, he bent and undressed her. His movements were slow, deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers as the firelight danced over her skin. He did not just remove her clothes, he unwrapped her, like a priceless gift. When she stood before him, bathed in the warm light, he touched her as if she were a vision, his calloused fingers tracing her collarbone, her waist, her hip. He went to his knees, pressing his lips to her stomach, his embrace tight, almost desperate. "You are mine," he murmured against her skin. "Mine." He made love to her with a possessive, almost reverent hunger. It was not the desperate search for solace in the greenhouse. This was a claim. It was the fire and the aftermath, a slow, deep burn that sealed their bond in the ashes of the night's violence. It was a promise, made not in words, but in the flesh. Later, they sat by the fire, Eva wrapped in his robe, her head resting on his shoulder. He was in trousers and a t-shirt, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was quiet. A soft knock came at the door. "Boss." It was Marco. Dominic tensed, his arm tightening around Eva. "Enter." Marco entered, his face a mask of practiced concern. He looked disheveled, his tie loose. "Boss, thank God you're back. It's a disaster. The Argentos while you were gone. They hit the port. They must have known. It was a setup. They knew exactly where to hit. We lost 2 containers." Dominic said nothing. He just stared at his consigliere, his face as cold and hard as granite. He did not react. He did not yell. Marco's practiced speech faltered under the weight of that silence. "Boss, did you hear me? They knew." "Yes, Marco," Dominic said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "They knew." Marco's eyes darted to Eva, sitting protectively in Dominic's embrace. A flicker of malice crossed his features. "This is what I was afraid of," he said, his tone shifting, becoming one of sorrowful advice. "This new variable, this wife, she's bringing a lot of heat. Dominic, a lot of unwanted attention. A man in your position can't afford weaknesses." He took a step closer. "It's a dangerous world. Things happen, people get hurt, even the ones we try so hard to protect." The threat hung in the air, subtle as a razor, aimed directly at Eva. Dominic's expression did not change, but his eyes went dead. In that moment, he finally saw the truth. The snake in his garden, the man who killed his brother, the man who had just threatened his wife. Eva was right. She'd been right all along. Marco, unnerved by the terrifying, flat silence, cleared his throat. "I'll start the cleanup at the port. I just wanted you to know." He backed out of the room, closing the door softly. Dominic continued to stare into the fire, his rage a cold, dense thing. Eva placed her hand on his, her touch a silent, "I told you so," but full of support, not victory. He did not respond. He was in a place she could not reach. A few minutes later, the door opened again, this time without a knock. It was Rosa. She walked in, her face impassive. She looked at Dominic, then at Eva. She walked to the massive oak desk, placed a small, black USB drive on the polished wood, and turned. She paused at the door, her gaze meeting Dominic's. The ghost team at the port was successful. "Boss," she said, her voice flat. "They got everything, audio, video, the entire meeting." She closed the door, leaving them alone with the truth. Dominic stared at the small piece of plastic. It was the proof, the confirmation, the death warrant for a man he had called brother. He finally turned to Eva, his expression a mask of cold, controlled agony. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was a fact. Dominic did not sleep. He sat in his study, the small black USB drive resting on the desk in front of him. A stark, modern confessional. He had watched the video feed from the port, his face a mask of stone. He watched Marco, his brother in all but blood, the man who had stood by him for 20 years, greet Luca Argento. He watched them embrace. He listened to them discuss the shipment, laugh about the distraction of Leo's kidnapping, and plan the final move that would expose Dominic as weak and strip him of his territory. He heard his own name spoken with contempt. He heard his wife's presence dismissed as a problem that would soon be handled. When the video ended, he did not rage. He did not break the glass in his hand. A cold, terrifying calm settled over him. The grief he felt for the living, breathing betrayal was instantly locked away, replaced by the calculating precision of the boss. The man who had held Eva in the greenhouse was gone. The man who had saved her from the sniper was gone. The man who had stormed a warehouse for her brother was gone. In his place sat the strategist, and his first move was to build a wall. Eva felt the shift the moment she woke. The house, which had started to feel like a sanctuary, once again felt like a fortress. But this time, the walls were not to keep enemies out. They were to keep her in and Dominic out. He retreated. He spent his days in the study. The door closed. He took his meals alone. When she saw him, his eyes were flat. His words clipped. He was polite, cold, and a million miles away. He was planning, but he was also hiding. She knew what he was doing. He was afraid. He was afraid of the man he was about to become to set this right. He was afraid of the necessary, cold-blooded violence that was required. And more than anything, he was afraid that when she saw it, she would finally see the monster she had first feared. He was protecting her from the truth of what he had to do. After 2 days of this glacial silence, she could not bear it. She walked into the study without knocking. He was standing at the window, his back to her. "I'm busy, Eva." "You're hiding," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He turned. His face was tired. His expression shuddered. "This is my world. It's ugly. You don't need to see it." "You don't get to do that," she said, walking toward him. "You don't get to decide what I can handle. You don't get to make love to me in the dark and then treat me like a stranger in the light. I am not a doll, Dominic. I am your wife, and I am about to tear my own family apart," he countered, his voice a low, rough growl. "I am about to destroy a man I called my brother. I'm doing this to protect you, to protect this house. Do not ask to be a part of it. It will stain you." She stopped just in front of him, close enough to feel the cold anger radiating from him. She reached up and placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. "I am already stained," she said softly. "I'm the girl whose brother owed $70,000. I'm the woman who was nearly assaulted in her own hallway. I'm the wife who was shot at through her window. There is no part of me left that isn't a part of your world, but I am not afraid of the blood. Dominic, I am afraid of this." She pressed her hand flat against his chest. "This cold, this distance. You're afraid I'll see a monster, but I've seen the man who threw himself in front of a bullet for me. I've seen the man who rescued a brother he despised, just to keep a promise." She looked him in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "I trust your heart. Dominic, I do not care about your empire. I only care about the man. So do not shut me out." He stared down at her, the ice in his eyes cracking, the wall crumbling. He had been so focused on the betrayal, he had forgotten the loyalty standing right in front of him. He grabbed her hand, lacing his fingers with hers, holding on like a drowning man. "He was my brother," he whispered, the pain finally breaking through. "He was a traitor," she replied, her voice firm, "and he threatened your wife. Now tell me, how do we end this?" He did. He explained the plan. It was not one of rage and gunfire. It was one of cold, public executions. "To kill him now," Dominic said, his voice regaining its command, "would be to admit he was right. It would look like a panic move. It would tear the syndicate apart. My father's loyalists, his loyalists, would see me as a paranoid tyrant. No, betrayal must be seen. It must be proven, publicly." "The gala," Eva said, understanding. "The gala," he confirmed. 2 nights from now, I am hosting the annual Peace Summit for all the families. I am inviting everyone, including Luca Argento. Luca? Here. He won't be able to resist. He thinks I'm a fool. He thinks he's won. And at the gala, I will make an announcement." He paused, his gaze hardening. "I will announce that due to the recent instability, I am ceding control of the Westport port, the territory he and Marco killed for. I am handing it over to a neutral third party. Eva saw the brilliance of it. It forces Marco's hand. Completely, Dominic said. He'll be apoplectic. He will have to contact Luca, right then, at the party, to explain what's happening, to try and salvage his deal. And when he does, we'll be watching, Eva finished. Rosa will be watching, Dominic corrected. She'll be patched into the estate's internal signal. The moment he makes the call, his phone will be mirrored to ours. We will have him live, in front of everyone. The night of the gala, the estate was transformed. Hundreds of candles lit the grand ballroom, a string quartet played softly, and Westport's most powerful and dangerous people mingled, champagne in hand. Eva stood by Dominic's side, a vision in emerald green silk, her hand resting on his arm. She was terrified, but she projected an aura of absolute calm. She was his queen. She watched Marco move through the room. He was the perfect consigliere, smiling, shaking hands, the picture of loyalty. He even approached Eva, kissing her hand. "Mrs. Varelli, you look stunning," he said, his eyes reptilian. "I'm so glad the boss is re-evaluating his security. This party is a brilliant move. Shows strength." "Thank you, Marco," Eva said, her voice like ice. Luca Argento arrived last, swaggering, a cheap suit on an arrogant frame. He nodded at Dominic, a smug, disrespectful gesture. "Varelli, nice place. A little exposed, though, don't you think so?" Dominic just smiled, a cold, thin expression. "Enjoy the champagne, Luca." At 10 o'clock, Dominic tapped a glass for silence. The music stopped. "My friends," he began, his voice easily filling the room. "Thank you for coming. We are here, as we are every year, to ensure peace. But peace requires new strategies. The recent aggression from certain parties," his eyes flicked to Luca, "has brought unwanted attention to my operations at the port. It has become a liability." A stunned silence fell. Eva could feel Marco tense beside her. "Therefore," Dominic continued, "effective immediately, I am ceding all control of the Westport port. I am handing it over to the Donati family, to be managed as neutral territory." The room exploded in whispers. Eva watched Marco. His face went chalk white. He looked at Dominic, then at Luca. He was trapped. He nodded politely to the man he was speaking with and began to move, fast, toward a private alcove off the main hall. "Now," Dominic said quietly to Eva and Rosa, who was dressed as a waitress. "Showtime!" Dominic followed, Eva on his arm. They stopped at the entrance to the alcove, just out of sight. Rosa stood nearby, holding a tray, a small tablet screen embedded in it. Marco was in the alcove, his back to them, his phone to his ear. His voice was a furious hiss. "Forget the plan, he's giving it away! Luca, you idiot! He's what? Marco?" Dominic's voice cut through the alcove. Marco froze. He turned, slowly, his phone still in his hand. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He saw Dominic, he saw Eva, and he saw Rosa, holding the tablet, the screen of which was clearly visible, showing Marco's own call log. "Boss," Marco stammered, I was confirming a threat." "You were confirming a deal," Dominic said, his voice quiet, lethal. He stepped into the alcove. "You, with him. Luca, the man who tried to kill my wife, the man you invited into my home. Dominic, listen to me. It's not what it looks like. She's been poisoning you," Marco pleaded, his eyes wild. "She's been telling me the truth," Dominic said. "A truth I was too blind to see. You killed Vittorio, didn't you? All those years ago. It was you." Marco's face crumpled. The last lie was gone. He knew he was a dead man. His eyes, full of desperate, cornered hatred, darted past Dominic. He was not looking at the man he had betrayed. He was looking at the reason he had been caught. He looked at Eva. "This is your fault," he snarled, his voice breaking. You ruined everything." It was so fast. He was not a soldier. He was a politician, but he was also a desperate, dying man. He pulled a small-caliber pistol from the waistband at his back. He did not aim at Dominic. He aimed at Eva. There was no time to think. There was only instinct. Dominic's world narrowed to a single point. "Eva!" he roared, He shoved her, hard, pushing her out of the alcove as he dove between her and the gun. The sound of the shot was deafening, a flat, ugly boom that echoed through the ballroom. Eva screamed as she hit the floor. She heard the shot, felt the heat of it pass her. A second shot followed, a high-velocity crack, almost instantaneous. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Men shouted, women screamed, glass shattered. Eva scrambled to her knees, her ears ringing. She looked up. Marco was on the marble floor, his eyes wide, a neat, dark hole in his temple. Rosa stood where she had been, her arm extended, a thin line of smoke rising from the pistol she had drawn from under her tray. Her face was impassive. Then Eva saw him. Dominic was on one knee, his back against the wall. His left hand was clenched, gripping his right shoulder. Blood, dark and thick, gushed between his fingers, soaking the front of his pristine white shirt and tuxedo jacket. He looked at her. His face was pale, beaded with sweat, but his eyes were clear and focused only on her. "Dominic, oh my God!" She crawled to him, her hands hovering over the wound, not knowing what to do. "Don't cry," he rasped, his voice tight with pain. He tried to smile. I'm not going anywhere." "Get him to the wing, now!" Rosa shouted. All business, grabbing 2 guards. They were in the estate's private medical facility, a sterile white room that was a miniature hospital. The doctor, a man with gray hair and steady hands who was kept on retainer, worked feverishly, cutting away the ruined tuxedo. Eva was shoved out. She stood in the hallway, Dominic's blood on her hands, on the front of her green dress. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and waited. Hours passed. She did not move. She just stared at the closed door. Rosa stood at the end of the hall, a silent, grim statue. Finally. The door opened. The doctor emerged, pulling off his mask. He looked exhausted. Eva shot to her feet. "He's stable," the doctor said, his voice weary. "He's strong, stronger than any man I've ever seen. The bullet went clean through. It missed the artery by 2 inches. He's incredibly lucky." Eva sagged against the wall, the relief so profound it buckled her knees. "Can I see him?" "He's unconscious. He's lost a lot of blood, but yes, you can see him." He was pale. So pale against the white sheets. An IV was in his good arm. His right shoulder and chest were heavily bandaged, but he was breathing. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. Eva pulled a chair to the bedside. She sat carefully and took his left hand. It was warm. She sat there for hours. As the adrenaline faded and the sun began to rise, she talked to him, her voice a low, desperate whisper. "I never wanted any of this," she whispered, her tears falling onto his hand. "I just wanted to be safe. I was so scared of you, of this world, and now I can't imagine my life without you. You were right. You keep your promises. You saved me. You saved Leo. You saved me." She squeezed his hand. "So you have to keep this one, too. You can't go anywhere. Do you hear me, Dominic? You can't leave me." She finally succumbed to exhaustion, laying her head on the edge of the mattress, her hand remaining possessively over his heart, as if she could keep it beating through sheer force of will. He woke to pressure, a warm, light weight on his chest. His shoulder was a roaring inferno, a universe of white-hot pain. But the pressure on his heart was real. He opened his eyes. The room was dim. It took him a moment to focus. He saw her. She was asleep, her face streaked with dried tears, her hair a mess, her cheek resting on his bed, her hand was splayed over his heart. She was safe. He was alive. That was all that mattered. Later that night, the pain had been managed, dulled to a heavy, throbbing ache. He was propped up on pillows, his arm in a sling. Eva sat in the chair, watching him, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. The silence between them was no longer cold. It was fragile, heavy with unspoken things. He reached out his good hand. "Eva?" She took it instantly, moving to the edge of the bed. "You're my wife," he whispered, his voice rough from the pain and the drugs. He tugged her hand gently. "But I want to be your man, too." He was not the boss. He was not the strategist. He was the man who had taken a bullet for her. He was asking, not demanding. Tears welled in her eyes. She carefully, so carefully, climbed onto the bed, mindful of his injuries. She lay on her side, facing him, her body aligned with his. He pulled her close with his good arm, tucking her head under his chin. She rested her hand on his chest, her touch light, her heart beating in time with his. It was not a night of passion. It was something more. It was a slow, tender, and emotionally charged reaffirmation. He kissed her forehead, her temple, her eyelids. She kissed his neck, his uninjured shoulder, his jaw. They clung to each other, whispering the promises that mattered. "I'm here. I'm safe. I'm not leaving you." It was a slow, reassuring, and desperate rediscovery, a sealing of the bond that had been forged in violence and now, finally, was settling into love. In the quiet, pre-dawn hours, he held her, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "After this is done," he said, his voice serious, "after I handle Luca, after the families are settled, if you want to leave, I won't stop you." He felt her tense. He had taken her choice at the hospital. Now, having nearly died for her, he was giving it back. It was the only thing he had left to offer, the final proof. Eva did not answer. She did not say, "I'll stay." She did not say anything. She just clung to him, her arm tightening around his waist, her face burying deeper into his neck. She held on as if he were the only solid thing in a collapsing world. It was the only answer he needed. 1 week later, the private medical wing was empty. Dominic was back in his study, his arm in a black silk sling, his suit jacket draped over his broad, uninjured shoulder. He looked like a king, slightly wounded but completely in control. The gala had been a disaster, but the aftermath was a masterpiece of silent, brutal efficiency. Luca Argento, exposed and humiliated, had been found in his own car, dead from a single professional shot. His crew, leaderless and terrified, had fractured within hours. The Argento threat was not just neutralized, it was erased. Now, it was time to rebuild. Dominic had called a meeting, not a party this time, but a formal summit. The heads of the 5 major families, including the Donatis who had been named in Dominic's ruse, were assembled around the massive oak table in the Varelli library. The air was thick with tension, with the unspoken question of Dominic's strength. Had the betrayal weakened him, or had the bullet made him a martyr? Eva insisted on being there, not at the table, but on a raised chair near the fireplace, silent, watching. She was no longer a secret or a weakness. She was Mrs. Varelli, the woman he had taken a bullet for. Her presence was a statement. They were a unit. Dominic stood, his good hand resting on the table. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming," he began, his voice a low, steady rumble that commanded the room. "You all saw what happened in my home. A betrayal, not by an enemy, but by a brother." The men watched him, their faces impassive. "Marco was not just a traitor to me," Dominic continued. "He was a traitor to our way. He colluded with an outside, reckless element." He nodded to the empty chair that should have been Luca's. "To incite a war for his own greed. He broke the peace. He threatened my home. He threatened my wife." His gaze swept the table. "I have the full evidence, the video, the audio, of his plotting, of his ambition. It is available to any of you who still doubt." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "No one? Good." "He has been dealt with," Dominic said, the words cold and final. "The Argento crew has been dealt with. The port, which was the source of this conflict, will return to Varelli control, but it will be managed with transparency. The Donatis will have oversight for the first 6 months to ensure fairness and rebuild trust." The head of the Donati family, a silver-haired old man, nodded once. It was a brilliant move. It was not a concession, it was an alliance. My father's generation believed in secrets. "They buried their traitors and called it peace," Dominic said, his voice hard. "Vittorio's death was buried. That mistake ends now. I am not my father. Our world only survives if it is stable, and it cannot be stable if the rot is hidden. I have cut out the rot. I have paid for it in my own blood." He gestured with his good hand to his bandaged shoulder. "This is not a sign of my weakness. It is a sign of my resolve. I will protect what is mine, my family, my territory, and my wife." He looked at Eva, a clear, public acknowledgement. "The Varelli family is stronger today than it has ever been. We are united. We are clean. Peace is restored." He sat down. The message was clear. He was not a paranoid tyrant. He was a surgeon. He had not just survived a coup. He had used it to solidify his power, expose his enemies, and rewrite the rules. The men in the room, old, dangerous, and cynical, saw not a wounded leader, but a man who had turned betrayal into an ironclad victory. One by one, they stood, raised their glasses, and pledged their renewed support. Order was reestablished, not with bloodshed, but with the cold, hard steel of truth. When they were gone, Eva walked over to him. She stood behind his chair, placing her hands on his good shoulder, her chin resting on the top of his head. "You were magnificent," she whispered. He reached up, his left hand covering hers, and brought her fingers to his lips. "We were," he corrected. Her decision had been made days ago, in the dark, as she held his hand and prayed for him to wake. His offer to let her leave it was a kind, beautiful, and utterly pointless gesture. She had walked into his life for safety. She was staying for love. "What you said," she murmured, "about me, in front of them. You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said, turning his head to look at her. "They had to see. You are not my weakness, Eva. You are my strength. You are the one who saw the truth. You are the one I trust." The next few days were quiet. The house, once a prison, then a fortress, finally began to feel like a house. Dominic, forced by his injury to delegate, spent more time with her. They ate meals together. They walked in the gardens, his arm out of the sling now, his hand possessively on the small of her back. He handled the final loose ends of his old life. He called Rosa to his study. Eva was there, sitting by the fire. "Rosa," Dominic said, sliding an envelope across the desk. "You are retired." Rosa, in her simple, practical attire, looked stunned. "Boss, I am your best field agent. I am your head of security." "You are," Dominic agreed, "and you have served my family, and me, with perfect loyalty. You also took a clean, 100-yard shot on a man I could not bring myself to kill. You saved my life. You saved my wife's life. That is a debt I cannot repay. It was my job, boss." "No," Dominic said, his voice firm. "Your job was to guard. You acted as family. So, you will be treated as family. You're done. The envelope contains the deed to a house on the coast and a bank transfer that will ensure you never have to work again. You're retired, as of now." Rosa was speechless. She looked at the envelope, then at Dominic, and finally at Eva. She saw the new dynamic. The boss was no longer just the boss. He was a husband. "Thank you," Rosa said, her voice thick. She picked up the envelope. "It has been my honor." "The honor was mine," Dominic said, standing and offering his good hand. Rosa shook it, then gave a respectful nod to Eva, and was gone. Then there was Leo. He was recovering in a private, unmarked hospital, with 2 new guards who had very clear instructions. His leg was broken, his nose was rebroken, but he was alive. Eva went to see him, but Dominic did not go with her. This was her visit. Leo was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. He had been in that van. He had heard what Luca Argento had planned. He had finally, at long last, understood that this was not a game. "Evie," he whispered when she entered. He tried to sit up, his face contorting in pain. "Stay down, Leo." She sat by his bed. "He came for me," Leo said, his voice full of a child's awe. "He had guns everywhere, and he came right through the door. Like he was the devil. He carried me out. Why? Because he made a promise to me," Eva said. "He should have let me die," Leo whispered, the tears welling. "After what I did to you, I'm so sorry. Evie, I'm so sorry." She took his hand. It was the first time in their lives she felt like the older sister, and he, the younger brother. "I know, but you're alive, and you get a second chance. Dominic, he's arranged something. He's going to kill me," Leo said, his panic rising. "No, Eva said, squeezing his hand. "He's giving you a job, a real one. You'll be working at the docks, a shipping ledger. It's a legitimate business. You'll have a small apartment. You'll be paid a small salary, and you will never, ever gamble again." Leo stared at her. "A job? It's a chance to rebuild your life, Leo, the right way. No more scores, no more shortcuts. He's giving you a chance to earn your way back. Don't waste it." He wept. Then, a broken, grateful sob. She had come for safety, but in her wake, she had pulled her broken brother to shore as well. That night, the house was truly quiet. The wars were over. The traitors were gone. It was just them. Eva was in their bedroom, the one that had once been hers, then his, and was now theirs. He was standing on the balcony, his shoulder healing, his sling gone. He was looking out over the city lights. She walked up behind him, sliding her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his strong, warm back. He relaxed, leaning into her embrace, his hand covering hers. "It's quiet," she said. "For now," he replied. They stood in silence for a long time. She finally asked the question that had been in her heart since the beginning. "Dominic, that night, at the hospital, you had never really spoken to me. You saw me at the diner. You saved me from that car, but you didn't know me. Why? Why offer to marry me? You could have just warned the Argentos off. You could have just protected me. Why marriage?" He was still for a long moment. He turned in her arms, so he was facing her. He looked down at her, his dark eyes full of an emotion she had once mistaken for coldness, but now recognized as a profound, deep-seated loneliness. "I saw you at the diner," he said, his voice low. "You were tired. You were scared. I could see it. This city was trying to crush you. And then that man, that politician, complained about his soup. He tried to bully you, and you didn't cry. You didn't yell. You just stood your ground. You had this fire, this unbreakable thing inside you. You were steel." He touched her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. "My world, it's full of liars, killers, and broken men. I was becoming one of them. I was becoming my father. Cold, empty. Vittorio was gone. I had nothing, and then I saw you. You didn't know me," she whispered. "I knew you," he said, his voice thick. "I knew I was dying inside, and I knew, in that one moment, that you were the only real thing I had seen in 10 years. He smiled, a small, sad, beautiful smile. "I offered to marry you because I knew you'd make me human again." Tears streamed down her face. He had not just been saving her, he had been saving himself. He kissed her, a deep, tender kiss full of all the words he could not say. A few days later, just before dusk, he told her to get dressed. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To fix a memory," he said. He took her back to the old city, to the small, private chapel. But this time, it was not empty and cold. It was filled with hundreds of white candles, their light warm and flickering. There was no deadline. There was no lawyer. It was just them. And the same elderly priest, who smiled at them as if he had known this would happen. Dominic, in a simple black suit, his shoulder almost fully healed, stood by the altar. He was not holding a contract. He was holding her hands. They renewed their vows. The first ones had been a lie, a contract signed in fear. These were the truth, spoken in love. Eva cried as he took her left hand. He slipped the heavy gold band off her finger, just for a moment, and then slid it back on, as if placing it there for the first time. He did not kiss her with the force of possession. He did not kiss her with the coldness of a contract. He lifted her hand to his lips, just as he had done that first night, and kissed her palm, his devotion a palpable thing. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, a long, slow kiss that promised a lifetime. When they returned to the estate, to their room, he had one last surprise. "You said you didn't care about the empire," he said, "but that you wanted to help people, that you wanted to be more than just a wife." "I am," she said, smiling, her hands on his chest. "I'm yours." "I know," he said, "but you're also you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single, antique key on a simple ribbon. "Your dream, to help women in crisis, to give them a safe place. He pressed the key into her hand. It's an office, downtown, fully funded, a charity in your name, to help the women this city tries to crush. The women like you were... Eva stared at the key, her heart overflowing. He had not just seen her, he had listened. He had given her back her purpose. The final scene found them not in the estate, not in a car, but on the street. It was a crisp autumn afternoon. They were walking, side by side, hand in hand, through the heart of Westport. They were just a man and a woman, in love. Except they were not. 4 of his men, including a newly promoted head of security, walked a discreet 20 paces behind. Rosa, whom Dominic had apparently called out of her 2-day retirement and was across the street, sitting at an outdoor cafe, her eyes missing nothing. They were protected. They were safe. But they were together. Eva leaned her head against his arm as they walked. She was smiling, a real, genuine smile. She was not the terrified girl from the diner. She was not the prisoner in the mansion. She was the queen of the city, and she was holding her king's hand. She looked up at him, the man who was her husband, her protector, her lover, the man she had saved. "So," she said, her voice light and happy. "What now?" Dominic stopped. He leaned down, his face close to hers, the city noise fading away. He brushed his lips against hers and whispered, his voice a low, possessive, loving growl. "Now, we live, and no one touches what's mine." He kissed her, deeply, right there on the city street. She rested her head on his shoulder, his arm securely around her waist. She was finally safe. She was finally free. Theirs was a love forged in the fires of betrayal and sealed in a trust that had been earned in blood. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We truly hope you enjoyed this journey of danger and devotion. Where in the world are you listening from? We would love for you to let us know in the comments. Please do not forget to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for more tales of love and loyalty. We cannot wait to read all your thoughts in English.